Welcome back to Fear Rest. In today's episode, I'm sharing 10 disturbing stories from the Appalachian wilderness. These are tales of people who ventured into isolated cabins and forgotten hollows, only to find something that was never meant to be disturbed. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Story 1. My uncle's cabin sat about 40 minutes past the last paved road in eastern Kentucky, tucked into a fold of land where Big Laurel Creek made this weird S-bend around a cluster of pine trees. I'd been meaning to check on it for 3 months, maybe 4 after Uncle Davis died. The lawyer kept saying someone needed to go up there and assess the property value, take photos, make sure squatters hadn't moved in. I kept putting it off because, honestly, I barely knew the man. He was my father's brother, but they'd had some falling out back in the 90s over something no one would explain to me. It was late September when I finally made the drive. The leaves were just starting to turn, that earliest hint of gold creeping into the green. I'd borrowed my roommate's truck because my sedan would have bottomed out on those logging roads within the first mile. The air smelled like creek water and decaying wood, that particular Appalachian autumn scent that's almost sweet, but not quite. I remember the radio cut out somewhere around marker 14, and after that, it was just the sound of gravel pinging against the undercarriage and my own thoughts. The cabin looked better than I expected. Single story, maybe 700 square feet, with a covered porch that sagged slightly on the left side. The windows were intact, which surprised me. Most abandoned places out here get their glass shot out within a year. I parked in what I guess you'd call the driveway, though it was really just 2 tire ruts in the dirt, and sat there for a minute with the engine running. I don't know why I hesitated. Maybe it was the silence. Even with my windows up, I could tell it was too quiet. No birds, no insects, just the tick of the cooling engine. Inside, the cabin was sparse but clean. A wood stove in the corner, a narrow bed frame with no mattress, a table with 2 chairs. Everything covered in a fine layer of dust, but hadn't been disturbed in months. On the table sat a coffee mug, the inside stained dark brown, and next to it a spiral notebook with a pen laid across the top. I picked up the notebook thinking I might find property records or something useful for the estate. The handwriting was shaky, uneven. The first few pages were mundane, lists of supplies, notes about checking the roof after storms. Then the entries got stranger. Heard it again last night. Closer this time. Sounds like Marion, but it can't be. Marion's been gone 7 years. Marion was my aunt. She died of cancer when I was still in high school. I flipped through more pages, put salt across the threshold like Mama taught me. It walked up to the line and stopped, stood there for 20 minutes. I could see its feet under the door crack, too pale, wrong shape. My mouth went dry. I told myself Uncle Davis had been old, maybe confused, maybe drinking too much alone up here. But my hands were shaking as I turned the pages. The last entry was dated 4 days before he died. It knows my name now, uses Davis's voice, my own voice. I hear myself calling to me from the trees. Tomorrow I'm leaving, should have left weeks ago. He died of a heart attack in town at the grocery store. That's what everyone said. I set the notebook down and looked at the windows. Full daylight outside, maybe 2 in the afternoon. I had a weird impulse to check under the bed frame, which was stupid because there was clearly nothing there, just bare floor and dust. But I looked anyway, kneeling down to peer into the shadows. That's when I heard the voice. Daniel, Daniel, where did you go? It was coming from outside, from somewhere past the tree line. It sounded exactly like my mother. Same cadence, same slight rasp she'd developed after years of smoking. She'd quit 5 years ago, but the rasp never left. Daniel, I can't find the truck. Where did you park? I stood up too fast, and my vision sparkled at the edges. My mother was in Lexington, 3 hours away. I'd talked to her yesterday. She didn't even know I was coming up here today. Daniel, why aren't you answering me? The voice was closer now. I could hear footsteps on the porch, the boards creaking under weight. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. Then they stopped right outside the door. I hadn't locked it when I came in. The handle turned slowly, and I watched it rotate all the way to the right before the door began to open. I saw a hand first, wrapped around the edge of the door. The fingers were wrong, too long, with too many joints. The skin was the color of old paper, gray-white and smooth like it had never seen sun. I don't remember grabbing my keys. I don't remember running. But suddenly I was in the truck with the engine roaring to life. throwing gravel as I reversed wildly away from the cabin. In my rearview mirror, I saw something standing on the porch, but the distance was too great and the dust too thick to make out details. It didn't follow, just stood there watching me leave. I got halfway down the mountain before I had to pull over and throw up on the side of the road. My hands wouldn't stop shaking for hours. The estate sold the property remotely. I never went back, but sometimes late at night my phone will buzz with a call from an unknown number. When I answer, there's silence for exactly 5 seconds. Then I hear my own voice say my name, just once, Daniel, and the line goes dead. I've started keeping my phone on silent at night. It doesn't help. I still wake up sometimes, certain I heard someone calling me from just outside my apartment window. 3rd floor, no balcony, no way anyone could be out there, but I hear it anyway. Story 2. The timber company hired me for 3 weeks of survey work in the Clinch Mountains, mapping old growth boundaries before they submitted their harvesting permits. I'd done this kind of work before, mostly in western North Carolina, and the pay was decent enough that I didn't ask too many questions about why the previous surveyor quit halfway through the job. Should have, probably. Would have saved me a lot of sleepless nights. They set me up in what they called the field station, which was really just a renovated hunting cabin about 6 miles from the nearest maintained road. It had been upgraded with solar panels and a satellite internet connection that worked maybe 60% of the time. The company rep who drove me in was this guy named Harold, mid-50s, who chain-smoked Marlboros and didn't talk much. When we pulled up to the cabin, he handed me a radio and a printed map with the survey zones marked in red. "Cell service is non-existent up here," he said, tapping ash out his window. "Radio's your lifeline. Check in every evening at 6. Miss 2 check-ins, we send someone looking." I asked him why the last surveyor left. He was quiet for long enough that I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said the isolation got to him. Some people can't handle being alone. I spent the first 2 days hiking the perimeter, marking waypoints with my GPS unit, taking soil samples. The forest was old, predominantly oak and hickory with patches of hemlock in the hollows where the moisture collected. Beautiful country if you like that sort of thing. I did mostly, had my whole life. Grew up camping with my dad every summer, learned to navigate by compass before I could drive. On the 3rd night, I heard the tapping. It started around midnight. I was lying in bed reading a paperback thriller I'd brought, one of those Tom Clancy knockoffs, when I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. 3 distinct knocks on the wall behind my head, the wall that faced into the forest. I sat up and listened. Nothing, maybe a branch, I thought. The wind had picked up around sunset. But then it came again. Tap, 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 same rhythm, same location, exactly head height if someone was standing outside. I grabbed my flashlight and went out onto the porch. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating trees and underbrush, but nothing else. No animals, no branches close enough to touch the cabin. The tapping didn't repeat. The next night it happened again. Same time, same wall, same 3-knock pattern. This time I was ready. I'd positioned myself on the porch before midnight, sitting in the dark with my flashlight off, watching the forest. When the tapping started, I switched on the light immediately. For just a moment, I saw something moving back into the trees. Something tall and pale that moved in a way that made my stomach turn over. Not walking exactly. More like gliding or sliding between the trunks too smoothly. I radioed in at 6 the next evening like always. Told Harold everything was fine. I don't know why I lied. Pride maybe, or just not wanting to sound crazy. The tapping continued every night. Always the same time, always 3 knocks. I stopped trying to catch it. Instead, I lay in bed with my headphones in, playing music loud enough to drown it out. But I could still feel the vibration through the wall, that rhythmic pressure against the back of my skull. On day 8, I found the first marker. I was surveying a ridge about 2 miles northeast of the cabin when I came across the tree. Someone had stripped a section of bark about 4 feet up the trunk, a clean rectangle maybe 6 inches wide. Inside the exposed wood, they'd carved symbols. Not letters exactly, more like scratches arranged in deliberate patterns. At the base of the tree, arranged in a perfect circle, were small bones. Bird bones, I thought at first. But when I looked closer, I saw tiny finger joints, delicate and precise. I took photos, logged the coordinates and moved on. Told myself it was hunters, or maybe something historical Native American possibly. but my hands were shaking when I marked it in my field notes. I found 4 more marked trees over the next 2 days, all with the same carved symbols, all with bone circles at their bases. They formed a rough perimeter around the cabin, I realized when I plotted them on my map. Each one exactly the same distance out, maybe 300 yards. The night I figured that out, the tapping changed. It wasn't 3 knocks anymore. It was continuous, a steady rhythm that moved around the cabin. Tap, 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 circling from the back wall to the side wall to the front. Never stopping, just moving in that slow, deliberate circle. I lay in bed frozen, tracking it by sound. It took maybe 10 minutes to complete one full circuit. Then it started again and again. I counted 7 complete circles before it finally stopped, sometime after 3 in the morning. When I went outside at dawn, I found footprints in the soft earth around the cabin's foundation. Bare feet, human-sized but wrong. The toes were too long, splayed out like fingers, and there were only 4 of them. They circled the entire building in a perfect track, never deviating, never overlapping. I packed my gear that morning. Radioed Harold that I was coming out early, equipment malfunction, needed to file my preliminary report from town. He didn't argue. As I was loading the truck, I found something tucked under the windshield wiper, a strip of bark, pale and fresh, with symbols carved into it. The same symbols from the trees. I threw it into the woods and got in the truck. I made it about a mile down the logging road before I had to stop, not because something was wrong with the truck. Because I saw them standing along the roadside. 4 figures spaced evenly, one at each cardinal direction, tall and pale and completely still. As I passed the first one, I made the mistake of looking directly at it. It had no face, not like the features were hidden, like there was just smooth skin where a face should be, pulled tight over the skull. I drove faster than I should have on those roads. Didn't care, just needed to get away. They found the previous surveyor 2 weeks after I finished the job. He'd been living in his car in a Walmart parking lot in Kingsport, Tennessee. Wouldn't go home, wouldn't explain why, just kept saying they defollowed him, that marking the trees had been a mistake. I think about that sometimes, about what he meant by they, about whether I marked the trees too just by documenting them. I've moved twice since then, changed my phone number, but every few months I'll find something small and out of place in my apartment. A bone, a strip of bark. A pattern of scratches on my door frame that I don't remember being there before. The timber company never went forward with the harvest. The permits got tied up in environmental review, or so they claimed. I think they knew. I think that's why they kept hiring surveyors who didn't last. Story 3. My sister inherited the place from our grandmother in the winter of 2019. Small cabin up near the Virginia border, on maybe 2 acres of wooded land that backed up against the George Washington National Forest. Grandma Celeste had lived there alone for the last 15 years of her life, never accepting any of our offers to move her closer to family. "This is where I belong," she'd always say when Mom brought it up. "The mountains keep their promises." I never knew what she meant by that. Rachel wanted to fix the cabin up and use it as a vacation rental. She'd been watching too many of those HGTV shows where people make passive income from mountain getaways. I told her it was a terrible idea, but the place was too remote, that the road barely stayed passable in winter. She didn't listen. Asked me to come up with her for a weekend to start assessing what needed work. We drove up on a Friday afternoon in February. The sky was that flat white color it gets before snow, and the temperature was dropping fast. Rachel had the heat cranked all the way up in her Subaru, and she kept glancing at me like she wanted me to be excited about this project. I was. Something about going back to the cabin made my skin feel too tight. The place looked smaller than I remembered from childhood visits. The porch sagged worse than it used to, and someone, probably Grandma, had nailed sheets of plywood over 2 of the windows. Rachel parked and immediately started taking photos with her phone, talking about renovation budgets and potential rental rates. I carried our bags inside while she circled the property. The interior smelled like mothballs and old wood smoke. Grandma's furniture was still there, covered in white sheets that had yellowed with time. The kitchen was tiny, just a sink, a small refrigerator, and a propane stove. On the counter sat a mason jar full of what looked like dried herbs and something else, something pale and organic that I didn't want to identify. Rachel came in stamping snow off her boots. "It's perfect," she said. "Totally rustic. People will eat this up on AM." I didn't answer. I was looking at something I'd just noticed on the far wall, partially hidden behind a covered bookshelf. Symbols painted in what might have been black paint, but looked more like charcoal. Protective symbols, maybe. They reminded me of something, but I couldn't place it. Did Grandma get religious at the end? I asked. Rachel barely glanced over. What? No. Why? I pointed at the wall. She frowned, came closer. Weird, maybe it's like folk art or something. We can paint over it. We spent the afternoon cleaning, mostly, opening windows despite the cold to air the place out. Rachel made lists on her phone while I carried furniture out to the porch to assess what was salvageable. Round 5, the sun started setting and the temperature plummeted. We retreated inside and lit a fire in the wood stove. That's when I found the journal. It was tucked into the bottom drawer of Grandma's nightstand, wrapped in a piece of oilcloth. The handwriting was definitely hers, the careful cursive she'd used for everything. Most of it was mundane, grocery lists and notes about garden planning, but toward the end the entries changed. March 15th, it came to the window again last night. Same as always, I told it no and it left, the wards still hold. April 2nd, found tracks circling the property line. Barefoot prints too large, it's testing the boundaries. April 30th, made the offering at the old oak. Used my own blood this time like Mama taught me. It accepted. The debt continues. I felt Rachel reading over my shoulder. What the hell, she whispered. I flipped to the last entry, dated just 3 days before Grandma died. The debt passes to blood. I've made arrangements. The mountains keep their promises. Rachel will understand when the time comes. Tell her I'm sorry. That's insane, Rachel said. She took the journal from my hands and flipped through it. Grandma was losing it at the end. Early dementia maybe. Mom said she was getting forgetful. I wanted to believe that, but something cold had settled in my chest. We ate dinner, canned soup heated on the propane stove, and tried to pretend everything was normal. Rachel kept talking about her renovation plans, voice a little too bright. I mostly stared at the fire. Around midnight I woke to the sound of scratching. It was coming from Rachel's room, the smaller bedroom that faced the back of the property. Soft at first, then louder, rhythmic, like long nails dragging across wood. I got up and moved through the dark cabin, heart hammering. Rachel's door was closed. I knocked. Rachel, you awake? The scratching stopped. Rachel. The door opened. She stood there in her pajamas, face pale. You heard it too. We stood there listening, silence. Then from outside the window a voice. Rachel, come outside, Rachel. It sounded like our grandmother, exactly like her, that same slight tremor she'd developed in her last years. Rachel, I need you to come outside. There's something you need to see. My sister took a step toward the window. I grabbed her arm. Don't. That's Grandma's voice, she whispered. Grandma's dead. The voice came again, more insistent. Rachel, the debt passes to blood. You know what you need to do. Come outside. I pulled Rachel back into the main room and locked the bedroom door from the outside, something I didn't even know was possible until I saw the old-fashioned hook latch. We sat by the dying fire, neither of us speaking, while the voice continued outside. Sometimes it was Grandma. Sometimes it was other voices, people we'd known. Our father, who died when we were teenagers. Rachel's ex-boyfriend. My own voice calling from outside, asking why I wouldn't let myself in. At dawn, it stopped. We found the marks in the morning. Deep gouges in the window frame of Rachel's room, like something with claws had been trying to get in. The wood was splintered, and there was something dark crusted in the grooves. The plywood that had been nailed over the window had held barely. We left before noon. Rachel didn't argue when I said we were leaving. We drove in silence for the first hour, then she said, "We are not selling it." What? We can't sell it. If the debt passes to blood, if Grandma was doing something to keep that thing contained, she trailed off. We can't pass it to someone else. I wanted to argue, but she was right. The cabin still stands. We pay the property taxes every year and make sure the deed stays in the family. Neither of us has gone back, but sometimes Rachel gets letters forwarded from the county clerk's office. No return address. Inside is always the same thing. A pressed flower, dried black, and a single line written in Grandma's handwriting. The mountains keep their promises. Story 4. I was working as a freelance photographer back in 2017, doing mostly landscape and nature stuff for stock agencies. The money wasn't great, but I liked being alone with my camera, liked finding places that felt untouched. A buddy of mine, Evan, told me about an abandoned homestead up near Spruce Knob, said it was pristine, totally photogenic, exactly the kind of thing I was looking for. He gave me coordinates and told me the logging road to get there was rough, but passable if I took it slow. I loaded my gear into my Jeep on a Wednesday morning in late October. The leaves were peak color, brilliant reds and oranges against the deep evergreen of the spruce trees. Perfect conditions. The drive took longer than I expected. The logging road was barely more than 2 ruts carved into the mountainside, overgrown in places where saplings had started reclaiming the space. I scraped bottom twice and seriously considered turning around. But I'd driven 3 hours to get here, and I wasn't leaving without photos. The homestead appeared suddenly, tucked into a natural clearing where the forest opened up around a small spring. 2 structures, both log construction, weathered to gray. The main cabin was maybe 20 by 20, with a collapsed roof on one end. The second building was smaller, possibly a shed or smokehouse, still mostly intact. Between them stood an enormous oak tree, easily 200 years old, its branches spreading like a canopy over the entire clearing. I parked and grabbed my camera bag, already composing shots in my head. The afternoon light was perfect, golden and slanting through the trees. I spent an hour just walking the perimeter, taking test shots, checking angles. That's when I noticed the bones. They were hanging from the oak tree's lower branches, suspended on what looked like fishing line. Small bones arranged in patterns. Some were clusters, like wind chimes. Others were single pieces, dangling and rotating slowly in the breeze. I counted at least 30 of them before I stopped counting. I almost left then. This wasn't just an abandoned homestead. Someone had been here recently, or at least in the last few years. The fishing line wasn't weathered enough to be old, but the light was so perfect, and I'd driven so far. I convinced myself it was just weird art, maybe locals doing something for Halloween. I took photos of the bones. Couldn't help myself. Through my telephoto lens, I could see details carved into some of them, tiny symbols etched into the surface. The longer I looked at them through the camera, the more uneasy I felt, like they were looking back at me through the lens. The light was starting to fade when I decided to check inside the main cabin. The door hung open on leather hinges, mostly rotted through. Inside was darker than I expected, the collapsed roof blocking most of the remaining daylight. I used my phone's flashlight to navigate around debris. The main room was empty except for a stone fireplace and what looked like the remains of a bed frame. But in the corner, partially hidden behind fallen logs, I found a metal box. The kind people use for important documents, fireproof and lockable. This one wasn't locked. Inside were photographs. Black and white, old, probably from the 60s or 70s, based on the printing style. They showed a family, a man and woman with 3 children standing in front of this very cabin. Everyone was smiling. Normal family photos. Except in every single photo there was something else. Behind them, partially visible at the edge of the frame, was a figure, tall and pale, standing just at the tree line. In some photos it was closer, in others farther away. But it was in every single one, always watching the family. My hands were shaking as I flipped through them. There were maybe 20 photos total. The last one showed just the cabin, empty, with the door standing open. The figure was inside the doorway, visible only as a pale shape in the darkness. I heard footsteps on the porch, slow, deliberate, like someone carefully testing each board before putting their full weight down. I shoved the photos back in the box and looked for another exit. There wasn't one, just the door and 2 windows, both too small for me to fit through quickly. The footsteps stopped just outside. I could see a shadow stretching across the floor from the doorway, cast by the setting sun, wrong proportions. The legs were too long, the torso too narrow. The shadow head was oval-shaped, featureless. I did the only thing I could think of. I turned off my phone's flashlight and pressed myself against the wall next to the door, holding my breath. The thing stepped into the doorway. I only saw it for a moment before I squeezed my eyes shut. That was enough. It was tall enough that it had to duck to enter, and its skin was the color of cave-aged bone. The arms hung too far down, and when it turned its head, the movement was mechanical, like something on a swivel mount. It made a sound, not words exactly, but something that might have been trying to approximate speech, like vocal cords that didn't quite work right, or someone speaking backwards. The sound made my teeth ache. I don't know how long I stood there with my eyes clenched shut, trying not to breathe too loudly. It felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. When I finally opened my eyes, the doorway was empty. The shadow was gone. I ran, didn't grab my camera bag, didn't look back, just sprinted across the clearing to my Jeep. The keys were in my pocket, thank God. I started the engine and threw the gear shift into reverse without checking my mirrors. As I backed down the logging road, too fast and wildly, I looked up at the cabin one more time. Something was standing on the porch watching me leave. Beside it, hanging from a tree branch at exactly head height, was my camera bag. I'd left it by the oak tree. I never went back for it. Lost about $3,000 worth of gear. Didn't care. The weird part, the part that makes me think I didn't imagine it, happened 3 weeks later. I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, professionally printed. It showed me standing in front of the cabin, holding my camera, taking photos of the bone decorations. Behind me, clearly visible at the tree line, was the pale figure, closer than it had been in any of the old family photos. On the back, someone had written in pencil, "You should develop these." I burned it, but sometimes I still wonder who took that picture. I was alone in that clearing, completely alone. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. Story 5. A hunting cabin belonged to my friend Garrett's family, way up in the Monongahela backcountry, maybe 10 miles from the nearest town if you went as the crow flies. We planned the trip for months, 4 of us, early November during deer season. It was supposed to be just a weekend of drinking beer and maybe getting some hunting in if we felt motivated. The group was me, Garrett, and 2 guys from our softball league, Finn and Carlos. We drove up Friday afternoon in 2 trucks, beds loaded with coolers and gear. The weather was cold but clear, perfect hunting conditions according to Garrett. He'd been coming to this cabin since he was a kid and knew the area like his own neighborhood. The cabin was nicer than I expected. 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen with a propane fridge, even a bathroom with running water fed from a spring uphill. Garrett's dad had put a lot of work into making it comfortable. We unpacked, got the generator running, and settled in with a case of beer and a card game. Around midnight, Carlos mentioned hearing something outside. We were all pretty drunk by then, and Finn immediately started making jokes about bears and Bigfoot. Carlos insisted it wasn't an animal, said it sounded like someone talking, but too far away to make out words. We went out on the porch with flashlights and swept the trees. Nothing. Just darkness and the sound of wind moving through pine branches. Carlos looked embarrassed, like he regretted saying anything. We went back inside and kept playing cards. I was dealing the next hand when we all heard it, clear as day from somewhere past the tree line. A voice singing, not words we recognized, just a melody high and wavering like a child's voice. The fuck? Finn stood up, knocking his chair back. Garrett's face had gone weird tight. We should go inside, lock the door. We are inside, Carlos pointed out. I mean the bedroom. All of us, right now. The singing got louder, closer, and now there were other voices joining in, harmonizing. It would have been beautiful if it wasn't so completely wrong, echoing through the forest at midnight, coming from everywhere and nowhere. Now, Garrett said, and his voice cracked. He practically shoved us toward the back bedroom. Once we were inside with the door shut, Garrett told us the story. How his older brother Tommy had been up here alone 3 years ago. How Tommy had heard the singing and, thinking it was hikers, had gone out to investigate. How Tommy never came back. They'd found his truck still parked by the cabin 2 days later. No sign of him in the forest, no tracks, nothing. Just his rifle lying in the middle of the clearing, barrel bent into an impossible curve, like someone had twisted metal like soft clay. My dad thinks he got turned around and fell into a ravine, Garrett said. But I was there when they searched. I saw his rifle. And I heard the singing that same night from back at the cabin. It never stops. Every time someone stays here, they hear it. The singing continued all night, sometimes close, sometimes distant, but never silent for more than a few minutes. We sat in that bedroom, 4 grown men, too scared to go check what was making the sound. Around 4 in the morning, we heard footsteps on the porch, slow shuffling, circling the cabin. Then someone tried the door handle. We could hear it from the bedroom, the metallic squeak of the handle turning, the door rattling against the lock, then knocking, gentle at first, then harder. Then pounding, like fists hammering against the wood. Tommy, a voice called. Garrett, I know you're in there, why won't you let me in? It sounded exactly like Garrett's brother. Garrett made a sound like he'd been punched. "It's cold out here, Garrett. Please. I've been trying to find my way back for so long." "That's not him," Garrett whispered. "That's not my brother." The pounding stopped. For a moment there was silence. Then we heard something on the roof, footsteps moving across the shingles directly above us. Back and forth, pacing. At dawn, everything went quiet. We waited another hour before we opened the bedroom door. The cabin looked normal. The front door was still locked from the inside, nothing disturbed. But when we stepped onto the porch, we found them, lined up on the railing, evenly spaced. 5 hunting rifles, including the one Garrett's brother had been carrying the night he disappeared. Each barrel was twisted into a spiral, metal warped like taffy. The 5th one was mine. I'd left it in my truck. We didn't pack, just got in the vehicles and drove. I kept checking my rearview mirror, expecting to see something following us down the mountain road. Nothing ever appeared, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Garrett's family sold the property that spring. Some developer bought it, talking about building vacation homes. I looked it up recently. The project was abandoned after the survey team reported geographic instabilities. I'm not sure what that's code for, but the land sits empty now. Sometimes I think about that 5th rifle, how whatever was out there had gone to my truck, taken my gun, and brought it back to the porch with the others. How it had known which rifle was mine, how it might have been saving it for when I came back. Story 6. My job doing broadband installations took me all over southwestern Virginia, mostly to places that were just getting internet access for the first time. The company I worked for had a government contract to bring service to rural areas, which meant I spent a lot of time driving up mountains to reach houses that barely qualified as being on the grid. In August of 2021, I got a work order for a property up near Burke's Garden. Address was just GPS coordinates and a note that said, "Follow logging road past marker 7. The customer's name was listed as M. Whitlock, and there was a phone number that went straight to voicemail every time I tried it. I drove out on a Thursday morning, van loaded with equipment. The coordinates led me up a Forest Service road that got progressively worse until I was crawling along at maybe 5 miles per hour, hoping I wouldn't snap an axle. After marker 7, the road forked, and I had to check the GPS 3 times to make sure I was going the right way. The cabin appeared after about 2 more miles. It sat in a hollow, surrounded by rhododendron bushes that had grown so thick they nearly swallowed the structure. The building itself was old, hand-hewn logs gone dark with age, but someone had obviously been maintaining it. The roof looked new, and there was a satellite dish mounted on a pole in the clearing. I parked and grabbed my equipment, looking for a good place to run the line. That's when I noticed there were no sounds. No birds, no insects, nothing. Just silence so complete it made my ears ring. The front door was open a crack. I knocked and called out, "Broadband install, anyone home?" No answer. I pushed the door open wider and looked inside. The cabin was furnished, lived in. I could see a kitchen area, a wood stove, bookshelves, everything neat and organized. On the table sat a laptop computer, closed, and next to it a handwritten note. "Installer, please complete the work. I'll be back this evening. M. Whitlock." Weird but okay. I'd done plenty of installations where customers weren't home. I went back to the van and started pulling cable. It took me about 2 hours to run the line from the road to the cabin and mount the equipment. The whole time I had this crawling sensation on the back of my neck, like someone was watching me from the rhododendrons. I kept turning around to check, but there was never anything there. Just those dense, twisted branches and the unnatural silence. I was inside the cabin, setting up the router when I found the photographs. They were on the mantel above the fireplace, arranged in frames. About a dozen of them, all showing the same person at different ages. A woman, dark-haired, smiling in most of the photos. Normal family snapshots. In one she was holding a fish she'd caught. In another she was standing next to a Christmas tree. But in every single photo, drawn in what looked like red marker, was a circle around her face. And extending from each circle, drawn across the background of the photo, were lines, like rays or maybe arrows, pointing inward at her face from every direction. Someone had also written dates on the bottom of each frame. The oldest photo was marked 1998. The most recent was marked 2019. I was staring at them when I heard the sound behind me. A wet sliding sound, like something being dragged across a floor. I spun around. The cabin was empty. but the door to what I assumed was a bedroom was now standing open. I was absolutely certain it had been closed when I came in. "Hello," my voice sounded too loud in the silence. The sliding sound came again from inside the bedroom, slow and deliberate, and then quietly, almost too quiet to hear, a voice. "Help." It was a woman's voice, barely more than a whisper. I took a step toward the bedroom, stopped. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to leave, but someone was in there and they were asking for help. "Are you okay?" I called out. "Help me, please, it won't let me leave." I moved closer to the doorway, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. I could see darkness inside the room, thicker than it should be, like the shadows in there were somehow more solid. "Where are you?" I asked. "Under," the voice said. "Under the bed. It made me hide here, it won't let me come out." I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut into the bedroom, illuminating an old iron bed frame and a patchwork quilt. I could see the floor beneath the bed. Nothing there, just bare wood and dust. "I don't see anyone," I said. "Look closer," the voice insisted. "Please, you have to help me. You're the first person who's come in so long." I knelt down and shined my light directly under the bed. Empty, completely empty. The bedroom door slammed shut, on its own, hard enough to rattle the frame. I jumped back, stumbling into the table, knocking the laptop onto the floor. From behind the closed door I heard the voice again, but it was different now. Deeper, not feminine anymore. "You shouldn't have looked," it said. I ran, left all my tools, left the router half configured, just grabbed my keys and ran for the van. As I was throwing the door open, I heard footsteps behind me. Fast, getting closer. I didn't look back. Started the engine and reversed wildly down the logging road, branches scraping the sides of the van. I made it maybe a quarter mile before I had to stop. Not because I wanted to, because she was standing in the middle of the road. The woman from the photographs, dark hair, same face. She was wearing jeans and a sweatshirt, and she was smiling at me, completely normal except for one thing. Her feet weren't touching the ground. She was hovering about 3 inches above the road's surface. I watched her mouth move, saying words I couldn't hear through the windshield. She raised one hand and pointed back toward the cabin. Then she flickered, like a light bulb losing power, and vanished. I drove straight back to the office and told my supervisor I'd finished the install, filled out the paperwork, marked the job complete, never mentioned what happened. 2 weeks later, I got called into my supervisor's office. The customer M. Whitlock had complained that the installation was never completed, that no one had ever shown up. When I insisted I'd been there, he pulled up the work order. The address was completely different. A house in town, not coordinates in the forest. The name was M. Whitlock, but the phone number was different. "You went to the wrong location," he said. "Whose house did you wire?" I didn't have an answer. The GPS coordinates ID followed, the work order I'd received, the note on the table, none of it matched what was in the system. It was like I'd installed equipment at a place that didn't officially exist for a customer who'd never requested service. I quit that job 3 months later. But sometimes I wonder who lived in that cabin, who the woman in the photos was, who or what was pretending to be her, and whether the real M. Whitlock ever got their internet installed. Story 7. I've been metal detecting for about 5 years when I heard about the old homestead sites up near Grayson Highlands. My uncle, who'd done some hunting in that area back in the 80s, told me there were at least a dozen abandoned cabins scattered through those mountains, places where families had lived before the state bought up the land for the park. He said if I wanted to find old coins or relics, that's where I should look. I went up there on a Sunday in September, hiking about 3 miles off the main trail to reach the first site my uncle had marked on a map. The cabin was mostly collapsed, just a stone chimney and the outline of the foundation visible under decades of leaf litter. I spent an hour working the area, finding mostly junk, nails, a horseshoe, broken bits of pottery. Then I got a strong signal near what used to be the back corner of the cabin. I dug down about 6 inches and hit something metal. A box, small, made of tin, that had oxidized to a deep rust color. Inside were personal items, a locket with a photograph, a man and wife, a baby's tooth, a lock of hair tied with ribbon, and underneath everything, a folded piece of paper. The paper was fragile, nearly falling apart, but I could still read the writing. It was a letter addressed to whoever finds this. The letter described something the family had seen in the woods, something that came at night and watched them through the windows, something that wouldn't let them leave. The woman who wrote the letter said they'd tried to abandon the homestead 3 times, but each time they'd found themselves back at the cabin by morning, with no memory of how they'd gotten there. The letter ended with, "If you find this, do not stay past sunset. Do not let it see you. Do not speak to it, even if it uses voices you know. Especially then, bury this box again when you're done. Maybe it will stay with us. Maybe it won't follow you." I should have buried the box right then. I know that now. But I was curious, and it was only 2 in the afternoon. I had plenty of time before sunset. I took photos of the letter with my phone, then put everything back and reburied the box. I kept detecting for another hour, working my way toward the next homestead site. Found a few more things. Buttons, a knife blade broken off at the handle, part of a cast iron pot, normal stuff. Around 5 o'clock I realized I'd lost track of time. The sun was getting low, and I was at least an hour's hike from my car. I started back, moving faster than I should have through the undergrowth. That's when I heard my name. "Samuel, Samuel, wait up." It was my uncle's voice, the same uncle who told me about this place, but he was at home 3 hours away. I'd talked to him on the phone that morning. "Samuel, I've been looking for you. Where did you go?" The voice was coming from behind me, back toward the abandoned homestead. I didn't stop walking. I definitely didn't turn around. "Samuel, don't be rude. Your old uncle hiked all the way up here to check on you." The sun was touching the ridgeline now, golden light turning orange, shadows getting longer. I picked up my pace, nearly jogging. "Samuel." The voice was closer, right behind me now, so close I should have been able to feel breath on my neck. I broke into a run. I don't know how long I ran. The trail seemed longer than it had that morning, twisting in ways I didn't remember. The light was fading fast, and I kept stumbling over roots and rocks. My metal detector banged against my backpack, and I considered ditching it to move faster, but couldn't bring myself to leave it. When I finally saw my car in the parking area, it was nearly dark. I fumbled with my keys, hands shaking so badly I dropped them twice. I got the door open and threw myself inside, locking it immediately. In the rearview mirror, standing at the tree line about 50 yards away, I saw a figure, tall, wearing clothes like my uncle might wear. But the proportions were wrong. The arms were too long, hanging past where the knees should be, and even in the dim light, I could tell the head was the wrong shape. It stood there watching as I started the car and pulled out of the parking lot. It was still standing there when I lost sight of it around the first curve. I called my uncle when I got home. He answered on the second ring, and I could hear my aunt talking in the background about dinner. He was confused when I asked if he'd been up in Grayson Highlands. Said he hadn't been up there in years, not since his knees went bad. I went back 2 weeks later. Different parking area, different trail, completely different section of the park. I told myself I needed to prove it was just my imagination, that I'd psyched myself out after reading that letter. I found another homestead site, this one with more of the cabins still standing. One wall and part of the roof were intact, creating a sort of lean-to shelter. I didn't go inside. Just worked the perimeter with my detector. Buried about 8 feet from what used to be the front door, I found another tin box, almost identical to the first one. Inside was another letter. "Do not stay past sunset. Do not let it see you. Bury this box again. It followed us from the other place. Now it waits here. Warn others." Different handwriting, different family, same thing. I found 4 more boxes over the next 3 months. 4 different abandoned homesteads, scattered across maybe 20 miles of backcountry. Every single one contained the same warning. I stopped going to those mountains after that. Sold my metal detector. Took up photography instead, something that keeps me in open spaces with other people around. But I still have the photos of those letters on my phone. Sometimes I think about posting them online, warning other metal detectorists or hikers, but I don't. Because I'm worried that if I spread the information too far, if too many people know about it, whatever is waiting in those mountains might notice. Might remember that I was the one who kept digging up the boxes, who kept finding the warnings, who never reburied them like I was supposed to. Story 8. Research station was supposed to be a sweet gig. 3 months in the mountains, monitoring air quality and wildlife patterns for the Forestry Service, living in a refurbished cabin with solar power and satellite internet. I'd applied on a whim, needing to get away from the city after my divorce got finalized, and somehow landed the position despite having minimal field experience. They dropped me off in early June. The cabin was about 8 miles from the nearest road, accessible only by ATV. My supervisor, a woman named Dr. Patricia Gaines, showed me around the equipment and went over the daily protocols. Pretty simple stuff. Take readings at dawn and dusk, maintain the monitoring stations, record any wildlife observations. The isolation gets to some people, she said before she left. You've got the radio if you need to talk. Check in every 3 days. She didn't mention that the previous researcher had requested emergency extraction after 6 weeks. I found that out later, reading through the logbook. No explanation, just a note that said J. Morrison, voluntary termination, 8/15/2020. The first few weeks were perfect. I fell into an easy routine. Wake up, coffee, morning readings, hike to the monitoring stations, evening readings, dinner, read or stream movies on my laptop. The solitude was exactly what I needed. No one asking me questions, no obligations beyond my simple checklist. The recordings started in week 4. Part of my job was maintaining audio recording equipment that captured forest sounds for a bioacoustic study. Every few days I'd swap out the SD cards and upload the files. I usually didn't listen to them, just transferred them to the server and moved on. But one evening I was bored and decided to scan through a few recordings. Most of it was what you'd expect. Birds, wind, the occasional deer moving through underbrush. Then, about 6 hours into one recording, I heard something else. Singing. The same melody repeated over and over, just 3 notes, but clearly intentional. Not a bird, not any animal I recognized. I checked the timestamp. 3 in the morning, 4 days earlier. I would have been asleep in the cabin. I listened to the next recording. The singing was there too, same time, same 3 notes, but closer to the microphone. I went through every recording from the past month. The singing appeared in almost all of them, always between 3 and 4 a.m., and it was getting progressively closer to the monitoring station. In the most recent recording, I could hear something else. Movement, branches breaking, and then just barely audible breathing. I told myself it was another researcher, someone from a different project I didn't know about. But that didn't explain why they'd be out there at 3 in the morning, or why they'd be singing the same 3 notes every night. That night I stayed awake past 3, sitting on the porch with a flashlight and the radio. I told myself I was being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the image of someone or something standing in the forest near the monitoring station, standing there singing to the recording equipment, getting closer each night. At 3:15 a.m. I heard it, not from the forest, but from inside the cabin, behind me. The same 3 notes sung softly, coming from the direction of the back room where I stored equipment. I spun around, sweeping the flashlight beam across the cabin. Empty. But I'd heard it, clear as day. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, sat on the porch with the light on, watching the tree line. When dawn finally came, I went inside to check the back room. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, except for one thing. The SD card I'd collected yesterday was lying on the floor in the middle of the room. I'd put it in my desk drawer. I was certain of that. I put the card in my laptop and opened the file. 8 hours of recording from the station nearest to the cabin. I skipped to 3 a.m. and listened. The singing was there, but this time it was accompanied by words, barely discernible, like someone speaking underwater, but definitely words. I see the light, I see you watching, I see you see me. Then clear and unmistakable, my own voice responding, who are you? I haven't said those words. I'd been on the porch silent, but that was my voice on the recording, from a microphone half a mile away in the forest. I radioed Dr. Gaines that afternoon and told her I needed to come out. Equipment malfunction, I said, needed to file a midterm report. She arranged for extraction in 2 days. Those 2 days were the longest of my life. I heard the singing every night, sometimes from the forest, sometimes from inside the cabin. Once I heard it coming from my own mouth while I was sitting there with my jaw clenched shut. The morning I was supposed to be picked up, I found footprints circling the cabin. Bare feet, but wrong. The toes were elongated, spread out like fingers, and there were only 3 of them. The prints made a complete circle around the building, passing right by the porch where I'd been sitting the night before. When the ATV arrived to pick me up, the driver, a guy named Lewis, looked at my face and didn't ask questions, just helped me load my personal belongings and got us moving. As we drove away, I looked back at the cabin. Someone was standing on the porch, tall, pale, completely motionless. Watching us leave. "Lewis," I said, "do you see?" "Don't," he interrupted. "Don't tell me what you see, just look forward." We drove in silence for the 8 miles back to the road. I never asked him what he meant. I think I already knew. The Forestry Service closed that research station 3 months later. Budget cuts, they claimed. The cabin's still there, I assume. The equipment probably still recording. I wonder what's on those recordings now. Whether the singing has stopped. Or whether it's gotten closer. Close enough to reach the cabin. Close enough to get inside. Close enough to sing along with you while you sleep. Story 9. My girlfriend Keisha and I had been looking for a cheap weekend getaway, something rustic and off-grid to escape Baltimore for a few days. She found the cabin on some peer-to-peer rental site, way up in the West Virginia mountains, advertised as authentic Appalachian experience, no Wi-Fi, total privacy. The photos looked great, and the price was impossibly low, $50 a night. We should have wondered why it was so cheap. We drove up on a Friday afternoon in March. The directions took us off the highway, then off the paved roads, then onto something that was barely a road at all. Just ruts in the mud and rocks that made my Honda scrape bottom every few yards. I was ready to turn around when the cabin finally appeared, tucked into a hollow so narrow the sunlight barely reached it. The place looked exactly like the photos. Small, maybe 400 square feet, but well maintained. There was a note on the door from the owner, a guy named Ned, saying he'd stocked the firewood and propane, and we could reach him by phone if we needed anything. He'd left his number on the bottom of the note. Keisha loved it immediately. She's always been more adventurous than me, more willing to embrace the weird and uncomfortable. I was less enthusiastic, something about the narrow hollow making me feel claustrophobic, but I didn't say anything. We unpacked the car and settled in. The first night was fine. We cooked dinner on the propane stove, played cards by lantern light, went to bed early. I woke up once around 2 a.m. because I thought I heard voices outside, but when I looked through the window I couldn't see anything, just darkness and the vague shapes of trees. Saturday morning, Keisha wanted to explore. We hiked up the ridge behind the cabin, following what might have been an old trail. At the top, we found the remains of another structure. Just the foundation and part of a stone chimney, everything else long since collapsed or rotted away. While Keisha took photos, I poked around the ruins. That's when I found the carvings. Symbols scratched into the chimney stones, dozens of them covering every visible surface. They looked old, worn smooth by weather, but still clearly deliberate. Some were geometric patterns, others were more like pictographs. Stick figures with elongated limbs, trees with faces, things I couldn't identify. "Weird folk art," Keisha said when I showed her. She didn't seem bothered by it. We hiked back down and spent the afternoon reading on the porch. The sun set early in that narrow hollow, shadows creeping in long before dusk. We went inside and started a fire in the wood stove. Around 8 p.m. we heard knocking, 3 slow knocks on the door, deliberate. Keisha looked at me, eyebrows raised. Did Ned say he was coming back? I shook my head and went to the door. Looked through the window beside it, no one there. I opened the door and checked the porch. Empty, probably a branch falling, I said, though I didn't believe it. We went back to reading. 10 minutes later, the knocking came again. Same rhythm, 3 slow knocks, this time from the back wall of the cabin. Keisha put her book down. Okay, that's not a branch. I grabbed a flashlight and went outside to check. Walked completely around the cabin, sweeping the beam across the trees. Nothing, but I had this overwhelming feeling of being watched, like eyes on my back from every direction. Inside, Keisha was standing in the middle of the room, arms wrapped around herself. While you were out there, I heard scratching from under the floor. The cabin was built on stone pilings, maybe 2 feet of clearance underneath. I really didn't want to look under there, but Keisha was scared, and I was supposed to be the brave one. I got down on my hands and knees and shined the light into the crawl space. At first I didn't see anything, just dirt and rocks and the wooden floor joists. Then something moved at the far edge of my light beam, something pale, pulling itself back into the darkness. I caught just a glimpse, a hand or something like a hand, too many fingers. I stood up fast enough to make myself dizzy. We are leaving. Keisha didn't argue. We threw our stuff into bags and got in the car. I started the engine and turned on the headlights. The driveway was blocked. Branches, dozens of them piled across the path. Fresh branches, still green, arranged in a deliberate wall. "What the fuck?" Keisha whispered. I put the car in reverse, planning to back down the driveway, but when I looked in the rearview mirror, the path behind us was blocked too. More branches. We hadn't heard anyone move them into place. We sat there with the engine running, both of us too scared to speak. Then Keisha pointed at the cabin. The door was open. We'd shut it when we left. I was certain of that. And now something was standing in the doorway, tall, hunched to fit through the frame, barely visible in the porch shadow. It took a step forward into the spill of our headlights. I've spent 2 years trying to describe what I saw, and I still don't have adequate words. It was roughly human-shaped, but everything was wrong. The proportions, the joints, the way it moved. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, and I could see dark shapes moving underneath, like organs or bones shifting around. The face was the worst part. Too long, jaw hanging open, showing teeth that went back too far. It tilted its head, studying us. Then it smiled. Keisha screamed. I threw the car into drive and punched the accelerator. We crashed through the barrier of branches, wood splintering across the hood. I didn't care about the car. I just needed to get us away from there. We made it maybe 50 yards before the engine died. Just stopped, all the lights going dark. I turned the key. Nothing, not even a click. In the rearview mirror, I could see the thing coming down the driveway. Not running, walking, taking its time. Keisha grabbed my arm. We run into the forest, opposite direction. Now. We ran, crashed through underbrush in the dark, tripping over roots and rocks, branches whipping our faces. I could hear it behind us. Not running, still walking, but somehow keeping pace. And now there were others. I could hear them moving parallel to us, flanking us on both sides. We ran until we hit a creek and had to wade through. The water was freezing, shocking, and for just a second I looked back. They were standing on the bank. 5 of them, maybe 6, all that same wrong shape. They weren't following us into the water. We climbed the opposite bank and kept running. I don't know how long. Hours, maybe. When dawn finally started to break, we realized we'd somehow made it back to the paved road. We were 3 miles from where we'd left the car, bleeding from dozens of scratches, soaked and freezing. A truck stopped for us. The driver, an older woman, took one look at us and said, "You were at the Harmon place." It wasn't a question. She drove us to town, didn't ask for details, dropped us at a gas station and left before we could thank her. The police went to look for my car the next day, couldn't find it. Couldn't find the cabin either, according to the report. Said the coordinates we gave them led to empty forest. No structures, no driveway. I pulled up the rental listing when I got home. It was gone. The whole account deleted. I tried calling Ned's number from the note. Disconnected. Keisha and I broke up 2 months later. Not because of what happened, exactly. More because neither of us could talk about it without one of us having a panic attack. We needed different ways to cope. I still have scars on my arms and face from that night. When people ask about them, I say it was a hiking accident. That's easier than the truth. Easier than saying I saw something that shouldn't exist, that hunted us through the forest, that's still out there, in some hollow in West Virginia, waiting in a cabin that may or may not be real, waiting for the next people who think they found a deal too good to pass up. Story 10. I inherited my grandfather's property when he died in the spring of 2018. 20 acres of mountain land in southwest Virginia, most of it too steep to build on, with a small cabin he'd constructed himself back in the 70s. I'd only visited twice as a kid, back before my parents and grandfather had whatever fight made them stop speaking to each other. I barely remembered the place. The lawyer handling the estate told me the property was paid off, taxes were current, and I could sell it or keep it as I chose. I was leaning towards selling. I lived in Charlotte, had no use for a remote mountain cabin, but my wife Angela convinced me we should at least go see it, maybe spend a weekend there, before making any decisions. We drove up on a Saturday in October, following GPS coordinates and handwritten directions the lawyer had provided. The access road was overgrown but passable. The cabin sat in a clearing of maybe half an acre, backed up against a limestone bluff that rose maybe 80 feet. The place was smaller than I remembered. One large room with a sleeping loft, a kitchen area, a bathroom that had been added later. Everything was covered in dust, but the structure was sound. My grandfather had been a craftsman, that was obvious. Every joint tight, every board carefully fitted. Angela loved it immediately. Started talking about cleaning it up, using it for weekend getaways, maybe renting it out on Airbnb. I was less sure. Something about the place felt wrong, though I couldn't articulate what. We spent the afternoon cleaning, opening windows, sweeping out dead leaves and mouse droppings. In a closet, I found boxes of my grandfather's belongings. Photo albums, old tools, a journal. The journal caught my attention. The leather cover was worn smooth, and the pages were filled with my grandfather's tight, precise handwriting. Most of it was mundane. Notes about repairs he'd made, observations about weather, lists of supplies, but scattered throughout were stranger entries. July 3rd, heard them again last night. Same pattern, 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, coming from the bluff. I checked this morning. No caves, no crevices large enough for animals, yet the sound clearly comes from inside the rock. August 12th, found another arrangement. Stones stacked in a spiral just past the tree line. 8 stones this time, each one marked with the same symbol I keep seeing. I knocked it down. By evening, it was rebuilt. September 20th, it spoke to me today, used my wife's voice. Catherine's been dead 12 years, hasn't fooled me yet, but it's getting better at the imitation, more patient. I showed the entries to Angela. She skimmed them and shrugged. Your grandfather was old, living alone up here, maybe he got paranoid. That made sense. I wanted to believe it, but something nagged at me. My grandfather had been sharp until the end, according to everyone who knew him, not the type to imagine things. We cooked dinner as the sun set, eating by lantern light since the solar panels needed work. Around 9 p.m., Angela went to bed in the loft. I stayed up reading more of the journal. The later entries were more disturbing. My grandfather described feeling watched, described finding his tools moved, sometimes missing for days before reappearing in strange places. Described waking at night to find the door standing open, though he'd locked it before bed. The final entry was dated 1 week before he died. I've kept them out for 40 years. 40 years of salt lines and rowan branches and monthly offerings. Now I'm too tired to continue. When I'm gone, burn this cabin. Don't let anyone stay here. The agreement was only with me. They won't honor it after I'm gone. I heard the knocking at exactly 10 p.m. 3 knocks from the direction of the bluff. Pause, 3 knocks again. I went to the window and looked out. The bluff face was visible in the moonlight, pale limestone gleaming. As I watched, I saw movement. Stones falling, or maybe being thrown, from somewhere high up on the face. Angela called down from the loft. What was that noise? Nothing, I lied, just the cabin settling. But I didn't believe it. I grabbed a flashlight and went outside, walking toward the bluff. Up close, I could see the rock face was covered in symbols, carved deeply into the limestone, hundreds of them covering every accessible surface. How had I not noticed them earlier? I heard movement above me, looked up in time to see a shape moving across the top of the bluff. Something large, hunched, moving on all fours, but with a gait that was all wrong. I backed away slowly. The thing stopped at the edge of the bluff and looked down at me. I couldn't make out features, but I could see eyes, reflecting the flashlight beam back at me, too large, too far apart. Then it dropped. Just stepped off the edge and fell the 80 feet to the ground. I heard the impact, a wet, heavy sound, but when I swung the flashlight toward where it should have landed, there was nothing there. Jacob. Angela's voice from the direction of the cabin, but Angela was in the loft. I just heard her call down to me. Jacob, where did you go? I'm scared. The voice was coming from the tree line past the cabin, moving, getting closer. Jacob, please come help me, something's wrong. I ran for the cabin, my real cabin, where my real wife was, burst through the door and slammed it behind me, throwing the deadbolt. Angela was climbing down from the loft, looking confused. What's wrong? Why are you out of breath? Something's outside, something pretending to be you. She stared at me. Jacob. Jacob, the voice from outside again, clearer now. Why won't you let me in? Angela's face went pale. That's my voice. The door handle rattled. Then pounding started, fists hammering against the wood. Let me in, let me in, let me in. We sat on the floor in the center of the room, holding each other, while the pounding continued. It went on for hours. Sometimes it was Angela's voice, sometimes it was mine. Once it was my grandfather's voice, asking why I'd come back, begging me to leave. At dawn, it stopped. We packed our things in silence and left within an hour. Never went back. I hired a property management company to handle selling it, told them I didn't care about the price, just get rid of it. The cabin burned down before they could list it. Electrical fire, the fire marshal said, though the place didn't have electricity, the land is still in my name. I can't bring myself to sell it, can't bring myself to pass this to someone else. Sometimes I think about what my grandfather wrote, about keeping them out for 40 years, about agreements and offerings, about what happens when the agreement ends. I wonder if they're still there, waiting in the space where the cabin used to be, waiting for someone else to build, waiting for someone else to stay. I wonder if they remember me, if they're still practicing my voice, getting better at the imitation, more patient, more persistent. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, hit the like button and subscribe for more. Let me know in the comments which story unsettled you most, and share this with your friends who love a good scare. Until next time, stay safe out there.